The fourth and the last module, corresponding to 6 sectors of Inclusive Cities Framework or ICF, has been divided into 6 parts. This module is designed to explain the indicators from all the 6 sectors with appropriate examples. So before taking a deep dive into the detailed list of indicators, we need to understand who are the stakeholders. Now this slide presents you an exhaustive list of stakeholders. These are the people who are responsible for providing urban services. These are the people from the target group, and these are the facilitators of technical experts. Now let us try to understand the existing on-ground challenges as seen in this slide. Persons with disabilities lack essential facilities like accessible housing and infrastructure, transportation systems, public places, workplaces, recreational opportunities. We also see that digital accessibility is another emerging challenge. This being said, on the other hand, there are systemic challenges that create barriers to disability inclusive interventions. And these are lack of disaggregated data on persons with disabilities, lack of technical know-how, particularly applicable design guidelines, and lack of budgetary provisions and overall lack of awareness.
So how can ICF help to bridge the gap? To solve a problem, you need to first identify the problem. The steps of ICF has already been explained in module 3, and you must have realized by now that most important and tedious task is filling in the required information against the identified 198 indicators. So this module will try to explain the procedure by taking examples of indicators from each sector. The most challenging task you would realize if you start doing it is to find the source of information. So we would also try to guide you about that. Also keeping in mind the implementation aspect, the probable persons or authorities or organization who could be having the data have been mentioned here. The first sector is on accessible housing, physical and social infrastructure. Now, since ICF stresses on seamless accessibility at city level, one important indicator, as you can see, is accessible mass housing connected to accessible mass transit and located in areas that are safe and close to services. So this column actually tells you the source and these other people who would be responsible for this. Next, say the issue of special cells or designated officials at the urban local bodies and at ward level for the purpose of helping people regarding matters like house renting, buying, allied services for vulnerable group. This information will be available with the ULB officials. Also, say someone wants to be aware of the specialized schemes and subsidies, that may be informed by the ward officers. The next sector is availability of accessible water and sanitation facilities, wash facilities, which will need to be accessible, and the public health engineering department officials can help in providing information related to this. Please note that this framework tries to be inclusive in all respects. The reason why the accessibility of water for informal residences has also been considered through an indicator. The universally designed community source is located within 30 meters from residential units and is reached by well-lit accessible pathways with proper signage. Similarly, for accessible community toilets. Coming to the solid waste management, formal residential units have access to door-to-door solid waste collection system on accessible garbage chutes at each level in case of apartment. We would like to highlight one thing, that there are certain indicators which we feel are mandatory and some which are aspirational. Now, the mandatory indicators are those with which we cannot make any compromise. For example, this indicator under health, like all levels of healthcare facilities are designed with universal access as per guidelines in URDPFI and harmonized guidelines, is a mandatory indicator. Whereas it is desirable that the PHCs equipped to handle basic treatment, diagnosis and trauma care are available at walking distance, that is within 1 kilometer, and connected through accessible pathways to the localities and the nearest transit points at neighborhood level. So this is an aspirational indicator. The document has stressed upon the necessity of a service being made accessible, not only places. Hence, this indicator of 24/7 services like doctor on call, ambulance on call are available for vulnerable population, including persons with disabilities. It may be noted here that for getting some information, primary data collection can be the only option, like simply calling the respective organizations and finding about the details. Same is for the educational facilities. Where the stress has been given on physical accessibility as well as policy level accessibility. Next, we have similar checklist for community facilities. So the detailed PPTs will tell you more about this. So these are some sources of data collection which might help you in the process, which includes primary sampling, information from Disability Commissioner's Office, municipal authorities, housing boards, health departments, and district education officials, and CREDAI, which is a private sector for housing related information.
Next, if we take up Sector 2 on outdoor environment, indicators included are accessible footpaths on all city roads are available as per IRC recommendations and harmonized guidelines, and separate cycle tracks on busy urban roads. Now, this might require some in-person survey. Organizations like Office of Disability Commissioner may be helpful in providing information related to availability of accessible, safe and clean amenities, including toilets, drinking water and seating in important public areas. Availability of street signage as per design recommendation in IRC 67 2012 Code of Practice for road signs and harmonized guidelines is an important indicator which might again require reconnaissance. Information from police department may highlight on location of CCTV, whereas DCO may inform about availability of grievance and assault reporting officers who are sensitive to the needs of the vulnerable groups. The sources are similar.
Next, Sector 3 on livelihood. Employment Exchange Office and annual report of DCO will be the major sources of information for indicators like availability of a range of flexible options, formal or informal, for employing people from all vulnerable groups. Then on accessible websites as well as accessible one-stop information centers like in each ward for related information. Additionally, the basic requirements of making offices physically accessible and extending special services to employees belonging to vulnerable groups like special transport organized by employers can be obtained from primary sources. The vocational training schools or centers for vulnerable groups may throw light on availability of job-centric training programs which are available for vulnerable groups. Sources of data. The fourth sector is on transportation and urban mobility. Now, this has an indicator on inclusive mobility plan which can be available within the ULB. Website of bus service providers, public and private, will give accurate information on frequency of bus services, including nighttime and weekend services. Whereas an interview with the service providers can tell about the sensitization programs being organized for drivers and helpers. Primary surveys here also may be required for assessing the nature of information available as stops and within vehicles, and also regarding availability of helping personnel at strategic locations. Though the routes of paratransit facilities might be available from the mobility plan document, the accessibility features at notable paratransit nodes need primary survey. However, the accessibility of booking apps and availability of accessible vehicles which can accommodate wheelchairs can be assessed by desk study. Annual reports and websites and similar information, secondary information, can be available on the sensitization attempts and programs. So these are the primary sources of information for the sector.
The next one is fifth sector on IT connectivity, digitization, public participation and governance. A major component of this is accessibility of websites of essential urban services, which can be a desk study. However, there is an indicator on availability of Wi-Fi facilities in selected public zones, and this can be obtained from ULBs. Whether there exists a special cell or a department or official in the ULB who is looking after the planning, implementation, financing and monitoring of all activities related to creating inclusive places and facilities in the cities is an important indicator, and the information can be made available from the ULB itself. Annual reports and website of ULBs can give information on mechanism for collecting feedback from vulnerable groups and presence of online grievance redressal mechanism.
We come to the sixth and final sector on recreation and tourism. In this case, officials of tourism department can give most of the information on list of accessible tourist places and details about them, including available connectivity. They study on websites of hotels, tour operators can tell about accessible tour packages which are available in the city. Office of Tourism Department can also be a single point of contact for many cases. Additionally, websites of private service providers will mention about various recreational joints available in the city, their accessibility and connectivity. So, like previous sectors, these are the probable sources, similar. Now, I'm sure this module has been successful in explaining how to fill in the checklist, which was our target, and conduct the strategic accessibility analysis exercise, since that is the most important and tedious part of the ICF. All the participants are advised to download the ICF document from the NIUA website and refer to the checklist in detail. The document will also provide you two very important information which have been included as annexure. A list of essential data which should be available with the city authorities and the particular organizations who should generally be responsible for each type of data. Second, a list of national and global guidelines and good practices which you need to refer to for preparation of sector-wise and pan-city action plans post the audit exercise. Also, we have provided an exhaustive list of global and national good practices which can help you in understanding that what have been done worldwide on these. Happy learning, all the best.